and your partner's left standing there.
What happens when a major Hollywood star signs on to a studio cop movie, rewrites it into something much tougher, and then walks away when the studio refuses to make his version? Out of that rejected rewrite came a different path, one that lets Stallone push forward with the tougher direction he wanted from the start. So how did that abandoned take on Beverly Hills Cop turn into something far different than anyone expected? Let's find out. This is the story of Cobra.
Society is breeding a new kind of criminal.
When Stallone was originally hired to play Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop, he took the existing script and reshaped it almost completely, removing most of the comedy and turning it into something far more serious. The studio read his revised take and rejected it because the added action scenes would have increased the budget beyond what they were prepared to spend. So Stallone left the project and Eddie Murphy stepped in. But the ideas Stallone had developed didn't disappear. He later used those concepts in a script over at Cannon Films. The new direction used Paula Gosling's novel A Running Duck that was later retitled Fair Game. The script shifted those ideas into a world centered around Los Angeles Police Lieutenant Marion Cobretti, a member of the LAPD zombie squad who is brought in when violence escalates beyond what regular cops can handle. The premise followed Cobretti as he becomes entangled with a group calling itself the New World, a cult that targets people they consider weak in an attempt to reshape society. When a woman witnesses one of their attacks, Cobretti is assigned to protect her, placing him directly between her and the killers. Cobra was centered around Sylvester Stallone, and the casting around him came together through persistence, timing, and choices connected to Stallone's interests. Brian Thompson did not glide into the role of the night slasher. He auditioned 7 times before being hired. On his 4th audition, he finally met Stallone, who decided Thompson looked too friendly for a murderer. But Thompson continued pursuing the part, and after a final screen test, he secured the role. During filming, he tried to get guidance from Stallone about the character's motivations, but Stallone showed no interest and told him simply the night slasher was just evil. Brigitte Nielsen was Stallone's wife at the time. Cobra became the only film where the two appeared together while married, and they divorced about a year later. Funnily enough, after Cobra, Nielsen played the villainess in Beverly Hills Cop 2 against Eddie Murphy, creating an unexpected link between her career and the film Stallone originally walked away from. Stallone also acknowledged Dirty Harry as an influence to the movie, and 2 actors tied to that film joined the cast. Rennie Santoni as Sergeant Tony Gonzalez and Andrew Robinson as Detective Monty.
It's also breeding a new kind of cop.
All along you knew it wasn't right.
The movie's music came from composer Sylvester LeVay. The soundtrack was released on audio cassette and vinyl in 1986, and a CD version arrived in 1992. Angel of the City by Robert Tepper also made its way into the soundtrack. Then there's Feel the Heat. Stallone heard the song while it was being worked on in the same building where Cobra was being edited. He liked it, so he just added it to the movie. When Cobra arrived in 1986, it was released in over 2,000 screens. By the end of its run, it earned $160 million worldwide on a budget of around $25 million. Critical response was far less enthusiastic. TV Guide remarked that Stallone's character was an empty hulk and that attempts to explore his personality were absolutely laughable. The New York Times wrote that the film pretended to object to violence while indulging in it, and another critic described the movie as disturbing due to the hero's actions and the audience's reaction to them. The LA Times dismissed the film as pretentious, dumb, and morally confused. Variety, though, took a different view, praising Cobra as a sleek and violent police thriller and comparing the character favorably to Stallone's more famous roles. Gene Siskel compared the film to Dirty Harry, giving it 2.5 stars and coined the nickname Filthy Harry. He noted that Clint Eastwood's character might have handled confrontations in a more simple way, where Cobra's methods were more aggressive. The film also drew 6 Golden Raspberry nominations, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, Worst Actress, Worst Supporting Actor, Worst New Star, and Worst Screenplay. So the movie's reception created a clear split. It earned significant money, critics were largely negative, but the audience responded more favorably than reviewers did.
You were spending time losing sight. Play a game that isn't.
Cobra's signature ride was not just a core prop. 4 fully customized 1950 Mercury Monterey coupes were built for the production by Eddie Paul. One served as the hero car for close-up shots, while the other 3 were stunt cars. All of them ran modified supercharged Chevy 350 engines connected to a TH400 automatic transmission using a Hurst straight-line shifter. Unlike most movie vehicles that only look powerful, these were actually equipped with nitrous oxide systems that were capable of producing around 600 horsepower. There was only one Mercury that had a fully finished interior, and the crew were not allowed to use it for any heavy driving scenes unless Stallone was behind the wheel. The car that appears to be destroyed on screen was not that vehicle at all though, but rather an empty shell dragged by a winch to simulate the impact. One of the stunt Mercury cars went through several owners before eventually being restored back to Cobra specifications by Eddie Paul. The restored stunt Cobra Mercury currently resides in the Virginia Museum of Transportation, while a small number of replicas have appeared over the years. Another stunt car still exists, but it's no longer drivable, having been gutted and hung up as a display piece at Planet Hollywood in New York City. The movie's hero car was kept by Stallone after filming and remained in his personal collection until it was stolen from his garage in 1994. The car turned up years later under the control of Cinema Vehicle Services, who were unaware of the car's history and attempted to auction it back in 2009. When Stallone found out, he contacted the company requesting for the car's return. They refused, and that led to a lengthy legal battle. The car was finally returned to Stallone in 2011, along with $3 million in damages. The first version of the script featured a movie theater shootout instead of a supermarket. Cobra had a girlfriend murdered by a psychopath, and there was a sequence where Cobra and Ingrid were attacked on a boat at night. Monty was the original leader of the New World cult, revealed in the final act before being killed by Cobra. Those ideas never made it into the film that reached cinemas, showing how different Cobra could have been. The movie climax also was meant to finish with a motorcycle chase on a ferry filmed in Seattle. Everything was ready, then Stallone decided he didn't want to deal with the mosquito problem during night shoots, so the ending was changed. Also, Stallone's personality didn't make the work environment easier. The supporting cast and extras were told not to talk to him during filming. Cinematographer Rick Waite eventually snapped and told Stallone the delays were happening because he spent more time showing off to his bodyguards and fooling around with his wife Bridget Nielsen. Stallone was supposedly shocked anyone dared to speak to him like that, and for a while he toned himself down. Then he drifted back to the same behavior. Waite later admitted that Stallone had a great sense of humor despite his huge ego, but also said George Cosmatos was a terrible director and would have made a better producer. Given what was happening at that time, that might be the most diplomatic insult in film history. The production was not only noisy in terms of ego, it was physically dangerous. During a stunt, driver Kerry Russell intentionally smashed the van into a wall, injuring himself and another stuntman. Bridget Nielsen narrowly avoided being hit by the same van during an earlier take. There were also strange moments of unprofessionalism that made the film feel like a school project with millions of dollars on the line. When Brian Thompson performed the monologue leading up to the final fight, Stallone was not even there. He was busy watching a basketball game. Thompson delivered those lines opposite a script supervisor instead of the star of the movie. But the real battlefield wasn't the location shoots or the stunts, it was the editing room. The movie's first cut was around 2 hours. After Top Gun became a massive success, Stallone and the distributing studio Warner Brothers were worried Cobra would be overshadowed, so they re-edited the film to allow more screenings per day. The MPAA also threatened it with an X rating unless some of the violence was reduced. The aftermath of all that cutting left fragments scattered across the industry like lost evidence. A longer television cut survived with extra minutes. A rare work print circulated amongst fans with 30 to 40 minutes of additional footage. It was the filmmaking equivalent of a missing persons case. Everyone knows what's disappeared and no one knows if it will ever return.
This is where the law stops and I start.
Cobra was released on VHS shortly after its theatrical run and later arrived on DVD, which kept the film in circulation for new audiences. The movie eventually received Blu-ray releases, offering a cleaner transfer and improved picture quality over previous formats. These releases made the film easy to access long after its time in cinemas, ensuring it stayed available for action fans who preferred owning physical media. Now, for anyone who wants to add Cobra to their collection, the Blu-rays are the best way to go. I've added a link in the description below, and there should be a card popping up on screen to make it easy for you to check it out.
Your partner's left standing there.
Cobra never became the franchise it was once positioned to be. In 1987, Stallone and Cannon Films attempted to move ahead with a sequel called Cobra Part 2, but the film never materialized. The film did branch out in other ways though. In 1986, Cobra was adapted into a video game for home systems, putting Cobretti's world into the 8-bit era. Decades later, in 2019, a television series based on Cobra went into development, but as of now, it's not known if this project is still moving forward. Today, Cobra remains a single, self-contained Stallone action film that has gone on to be regarded as a cult classic amongst us action fans.
Ivan Danko came from behind the Iron Curtain.
Danko.
What happens when a simple pitch turns a Russian cop in Chicago into a studio bet on a cold-eyed officer from the other side of the Iron Curtain? From that spark came a buddy cop story about cultural shock, clashing methods, and two lawmen who need each other more than either side wants to admit. So how did that single idea plus a cocaine-filled wooden leg turn into an action comedy that asks if American viewers would accept a hard Soviet cop? Let's find out. This is the story of Red Heat.
But you're not supposed to play with boxes!
The idea for Red Heat came from Walter Hill. He wanted a story where a Russian officer teams up with a Chicago detective in a strange city setup. After finishing 48 Hours, the director felt Arnold Schwarzenegger was ready for something new and wanted a project with him. He didn't want a science fiction setup and thought it would be hard to sell him as a regular American cop with his strong accent, so he flipped it and made him Russian on purpose. He also wanted the film to feel like an old John Wayne or Clint Eastwood movie, with a big central figure and a simple plot, and then added one clear question on top of it. Would viewers accept a loyal Soviet hero who does not change sides? Kuroko Pictures liked that pitch and gave the project the green light. When Hill first spoke to Schwarzenegger, there was a basic setup and one vivid moment. In that moment, a leg comes off and inside the false limb sits a stash of cocaine. The idea did not start in this film. It came from a script by writer Harry Kleiner that Hill had read earlier and turned it down. Hill did not want that older project, but he loved the idea of the wooden leg so much that he paid Kleiner for it and kept it for his film. From there, he started shaping the lead. To guide him in the part, he told him to study Greta Garbo in Ninotchka, using that film as an example of how a strict, duty-led character might react to a new culture. With the lead already locked in, the next step was finding the people around him, starting with his partner. Getting Jim Belushi for the Chicago officer was Walter Hill's idea. He liked his humor and thought he would play well opposite the lead. To get ready, Belushi did not just read the script and show up for filming. He spent 2 weeks in the company of police from his own neighborhood in Chicago. That preparation fed straight into how he played Detective Art Ritzit. For the main villain and the woman caught in the middle, Hill turned to Edo Ross and Gina Gershon. Ross took on the role of Victor Rostavelli and enjoyed using the Russian accent so much that he later played more characters from that region in other projects. Gershon stepped into the role of Catherine Manzetti, Rostavelli's American wife. Around that core group, Red Heat fills out its world with a large set of character actors. Peter Boyle as Lou Donnelly, Lawrence Fishburne as Charlie Stobbs, Richard Bright as Max Gallagher, and Brent Jennings as Abdul Elijah. For the score, Walter Hill brought in composer James Horner. Hill said he told Horner he wanted music like the feeling of winning a gold medal at the Olympics. Among the most striking choices is one that sits right at the start and the end of the movie. Hill and Horner used the second movement Philosophers from Sergei Prokofiev's cantata for the 20th anniversary of the October Revolution. Under that, Horner leans on themes and ideas he had used before. The Red Heat soundtrack reuses motifs from his score from 48 Hours, and those ideas would appear again in later work like Commando and another 48 Hours. It fits how Horner often worked during that period, taking material that already proved useful and building on it again.
Police Captain Ivan Danko came from behind the Iron Curtain.
Danko, you're welcome.
Red Heat reached cinemas in June '88, with TriStar handling the distribution. It came out of the gate in first place at the box office and went on to earn $35 million in the United States. On paper, that sounds solid, but it was still left behind by Arnold Schwarzenegger's other 1988 film, Twins, which pulled in far more attention and more money. Hill later summed it up in his own words. He said the film did pretty well domestically, though not at the level he and his backers had hoped. Arnold's view was very direct. He said the film was not the smash he expected. The reason was hard to pin down. He floated ideas that maybe audiences were not ready for a Russian hero, or that his and Jim Belushi's work was not funny enough, or that the director did not do a good job. Whatever the cause, he felt the film did not quite close the deal. On the critics' side, the picture landed in the middle ground. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars out of 4 and pointed out that the violence stayed in a kind of comic territory rather than going for real horror, noting that Hill knew how to walk the line. Variety also came down on the positive side, praising Schwarzenegger as a convincing iron-willed officer. On the other hand, Hal Hinson at the Washington Post called the film poorly made and joyless.
You're welcome.
Hunting down his country's deadliest criminal.
What did he do? Take a leak on the Kremlin wall or something?
The production moved through several countries. Shooting began in late August 1987. The opening bathhouse fight was staged at the Ruders thermal bath in Budapest. The second part of that sequence, which needed snow, was filmed in Austria, since Budapest did not have winter conditions at that time. The crew also slipped in extra work. A small unit with Schwarzenegger and the camera quietly grabbed material around the Red Square. When they arrived, they could move without trouble. Yet when they left 2 days later, several local kids waited outside the hotel to get Schwarzenegger's autograph. The prison material also used the real site. The crew filmed in a working institution with around 200 actual inmates held within the building during the shoot. Not every story from the set is light. Stunt coordinator Benny Dobbins suffered a heart attack and died during the shoot. He had been close to Schwarzenegger for years and often traveled with him to live events. Some accounts even credit him with starting the actor on cigars. Walter Hill also had a clear idea about the weapons and hardware. For Danko's sidearm, he wanted a Soviet pistol that looked bigger and more menacing than anything else. Gunsmith Tim LaFrance built a custom piece based on the Desert Eagle, turning that prop into something unique that fans later knew as the pot-beating pistol or Hollywood Eagle. For Victor Ostavilli, Hill asked for a hidden gun that felt like something a mobster might wear. LaFrance built a modified Derringer on a spring rig that sat along the forearm and snapped into the hand with the right movement. The climactic pursuit also came out of a specific choice from Hill. He decided to use buses instead of cars for the final chase and crash because he felt that would look more interesting and because Schwarzenegger's large build never quite suits a regular car seat. The result is the long run with 2 city buses that ends in a collision with a freight train.
I need cooperation. Sure. Whatever you say, Gumby.
Now, he's about to team up.
After its theatrical run, the film moved quickly onto VHS. The first release arrived in late 1988 from International Video Entertainment. Then, a second cassette hit stores in 1989 as labels kept the film on rental shelves and home collections. DVD editions arrived in the next decade. The movie reached disc format in August '97 through Live Home Entertainment, then came back in 2001 from Artisan Home Entertainment before Lionsgate issued a special edition DVD in early 2004. High-definition releases came later. The studio put out a Blu-ray edition in November 2009 and then issued a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray in 2019. For anyone who wants to add Red Heat into their collection, I've added a link in the description below, and there should be a card popping up on screen to help you check it out.
He's about to team up.
What do you say? He say, go and kiss your mother's behind.
Red Heat never turned into a franchise. No sequel, no remake, no spin-offs. It stands on its own as one of Arnold's underrated gems from the late 80s. The action hits hard, the humour works, and the chemistry between Schwarzenegger and Belushi still clicks all these years later. Looking back, it's one of those movies that didn't get the love it deserved when it first came out. The fact is, it's a solid movie. The fights, the one-liners, the old-school tone, it just feels straight out of a time when action films had grit and personality. It's a simple story done well, and that's part of why a lot of people keep coming back to it. It's a shame a sequel never happened, because Danko and Ridzik had a kind of pairing that could have easily carried another movie. But maybe that's what makes it special, a one solid film that never tried to outstay its
San
welcome.
Francisco Bay Area.
And the one you abandon becomes your only hope.
What happens when a studio bets on an abandoned prison, a nervous FBI chemist, and an aging British operative who should never have been locked up in the first place? Out of script rewrites, studio tension, and a director still finding his voice, an action thriller was born. So how did this risky setup turn into one of the biggest action films of all time, while leaving behind stories far stranger than the movie itself? Let's find out. This is the story of The Rock.
Trained to defend you becomes your greatest threat.
A battery of VX gas rockets is presently deployed to deliver a highly lethal strike.
The core idea behind The Rock started as a straightforward action setup built around an unusual location. The project was directed by Michael Bay and produced by Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. The initial script was written by David Weisberg and Douglas S. Cook. Their spec script established the basic framework. A rogue general seizes Alcatraz Island and threatens San Francisco with stolen VX gas rockets unless the government pays a ransom. As the script moved forward, it went through heavy development. The spec script was reworked by several writers. Mark Rosner ultimately received official screenplay credit alongside Weisberg and Cook after Writers Guild arbitration. Jonathan Hensley participated in writing but was not credited. Michael Bay later wrote an opening letter criticizing the arbitration procedure, calling it a sham and a travesty, and stating that Hensley had worked closely with him and should have received screen credit. At Sean Connery's request, British writing duo Dick Clement and Ian LaFreniere were brought in to rewrite his lines. Quentin Tarantino and Aaron Sorkin also contributed uncredited script work. In the end, the script had passed by so many hands that by Hollywood standards, it was basically Bonnie Blue. With the premise in place, the film leaned heavily on its casting. Sean Connery was cast as John Patrick Mason, a former SAS and MI6 operative and the only man to ever escape Alcatraz. Mason had been held without trial after stealing classified information and refusing to give up its location. So basically, the CIA decided to lock up James Bond, and now they're begging for his help. It was reported that Sean Connery accepted the part after learning that Nicolas Cage had been cast as Stanley Goodspeed, the FBI chemical weapons specialist brought into the mission to deal with the VX rockets. At one point, Arnold Schwarzenegger was considered for the role of Stanley Goodspeed, but he turned it down because he didn't like the script. Ed Harris took on the role of General Francis Hummel. Producer Don Simpson was largely responsible for creating the character of General Hummel. Simpson watched a segment of 60 Minutes about the US government's refusal to acknowledge soldiers who had died during covert overseas missions, and later read Colonel David Hackworth's memoirs. He combined these elements into creating Hummel's character. Around the three leads, the supporting cast filled out the military and federal chain of command. Michael Bain played Commander Charles Anderson, the Navy SEAL officer leading the initial rescue mission on Alcatraz. David Morse appeared as Major Tom Baxter, Hummel's closest ally within the group. John Spencer portrayed FBI Director James Womack. the official overseeing the operation from above. William Forsythe played FBI agent Ernest Paxton. The film also featured a large group of military officers, agents, and personnel played by various well-known actors and actual Navy SEALs.
The population of the San Francisco Bay Area.
And the one you abandon becomes your only hope.
The score for The Rock was led by Hans Zimmer, working alongside his longtime collaborator Nick Blenny Smith. Harry Gregson Williams served as score producer, with additional music contributed by Don Harper and Stephen M. Stern. The project marked the first collaboration between Zimmer and director Michael Bay, a partnership that would continue across many of Bay's later films. When The Rock reached cinemas, its opening weekend brought in $25 million, beating Mission Impossible. The momentum held on its second weekend. The film was overtaken by The Cable Guy, but it remained strong, earning $18.5 million. By its third weekend, it was still pulling in significant numbers. By the end of its run, the movie had earned $134 million in the United States and Canada, with an additional $200 million overseas. That's not bad for a movie about gas balls and unresolved military trauma. The film also earned industry recognition. It received an Academy Award nomination for Best Sound and won Best On-Screen Duo for Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage at the MTV Movie Awards. A soundtrack was also released on CD through Hollywood Records.
Hiya, I'm an agent with the FBI. I'm Stanley Goodsby.
Behind the scenes, the movie quickly proved to be a complicated production, largely because of where it was filmed and who was in charge. Most of the movie was shot on location at Alcatraz prison itself. Because the island is governed by the National Park Service, the production was not allowed to shut it down. Filming had to work around real tour groups moving through the prison every day, which meant carefully timed takes, controlled sections of the island, and constant adjustments to keep visitors out of frame while still moving at speed. However, in December '95, it was decided to partially shut down Alcatraz, and filming continued with no visitors present. San Francisco locations were also used heavily. The scene where FBI Director Womack is thrown from a balcony was filmed at the Fairmont Hotel. That sequence specifically caused real confusion at the time, with hotel staff receiving multiple calls from members of the public who believed they were witnessing an actual incident. Another small moment from the shoot reflected how chaotic the production environment was. According to William Forsythe, about 3 weeks into filming, as the production was preparing to move locations, he went to grab a hot dog from the set catering. A crew member mistook him for an extra and told him that extras were not allowed to take food from craft services. Forsythe said the employee called for security, who arrived and quickly clarified that he was in fact part of the main cast. This production marked an early turning point for Michael Bay. This was his first film shot in widescreen format, using a Super 35. Bay later said he disliked the look at the time due to the quality of released prints and would avoid the format on later films until digital processing improved. The car chase in San Francisco turned out to be the biggest issue. Director Michael Bay said getting clearances for even a 2-block stretch required thousands of signatures, and when they fell behind on the shooting schedule, that resulted in Bay clashing with Walt Disney Studio executives who were overseeing the production. Bay recalled leaving the set for a meeting with the executives when Sean Connery approached him. Connery, who also served as a producer on the movie, joined Bay at the meeting and defended him directly, insisting that he was doing a great job and should be left alone. According to Bay, the executives were really surprised when Connery walked into the room behind him. Now, not all filming took place in San Francisco. The closing scene of the film was shot outside the Sacred Heart Mission Church in Saticoy, California, standing in for the quiet endpoint of Mason's story. The production also carried a quieter weight behind the scenes. The film was dedicated to the memory of producer Don Simpson, who died 5 months before the movie's release. After its theatrical run, The Rock continued to find a long life on home media. The film was released on VHS and Laserdisc in the late 90s, quickly becoming a strong rental and sell-through title. It later arrived on DVD in multiple editions. Over time, The Rock moved into Blu-ray, keeping the film widely available for new audiences and long-time fans. For fans who want to add the movie to their collection, I've added a link in the description below, and there should be a card popping up on screen to help you check it out. The movie unfortunately did not lead to a sequel, despite its success. Years later, Michael Bay revealed that he had once discussed an idea for a continuation in which Stanley Goodspeed and John Mason would be pursued by the government after escaping with a microfilm shown at the end of the film. Sadly, that concept never moved beyond discussion. Now, the film's legacy extended well beyond box office numbers. It became one of the most frequently cited examples of Michael Bay at his peak, often referenced as the clearest expression of his early style before his later work became more divisive. So going back to our initial question, what happens when a studio bets on an abandoned prison, a nervous FBI chemist, and an aging British operative who should never have been locked up in the first place? The Rock combined a strong location, clear stakes, and performances that grounded the spectacle even when the production itself was under pressure. That balance is why it worked then and why it still holds up now. And we're not done yet. Next time, we look at an underrated 80s classic. Until then, why don't you check out our previous video on the making of Undisputed 2. Thanks for watching, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.